In this video, we're going to be making up actors from multiple meshes. You'll basically import the tank in 4 static mesh parts, assemble the parts using sockets, and then we'll create a tank blueprint and test. By the end of it, you'll have something looking something like this, an untextured but otherwise pretty cool tank, and a corresponding blueprint and all the parts assembled properly. So let's go and make that happen. So let's finally put this tank together. In the resources attached to this lecture, you should find the battle tank, well, the tankparts.zip file. If you open that up, you'll have a bunch of FBXs. So before I go any further, I'd like to thank Robert Wu, one of our students who kindly donated this tank model for the course, and you can find a link to his Facebook profile in the resources of this lecture. So let's get those into Unreal. There's a few ways to do this. You can either be in Unreal, and in your content browser, you can right-click. In fact, let's make a folder for the tank. So make a folder for the tank. And then in that folder, we can right-click and say Import to Game Tank folder. We can do that. Point it at the downloads, tank parts, and then we could select them all. That's one way. Or we could have dragged them in. But I'm going to do it the way of just selecting. So I'm importing into the new tank folder. I'm going to use the default import settings. Ideally, if you're working with a modeler, they will set things up so that you don't have to mess around here. And then we're going to get 4 skeletal mesh, sorry, not skeletal, but static meshes. They don't have bones and things in here. There they go. There's actually some materials with them. We could delete those materials because we're going to recreate our own materials later. So ditch the materials, and you can even force delete them. It doesn't matter. And now let's take a look at these meshes one at a time. So we've got a barrel. You can dock this barrel to the top. There it is. Nice. Sitting there. Perfectly okay. What else do we have? We have a body. There it is, sitting on the origin. The 0, 0 point's about the middle of the bottom of the tank there. We'll see why that matters in a little bit. Let's take a look at the rest. We've got some tracks, again sitting on the origin there, and a turret sitting on the ground, and that's all good stuff. And the barrel is also sitting on the ground. Good. So I'm just checking that all of these models are sitting so that the position that we want to attach them to something else is at 0, 0, is at the origin. And that's how your models need to be specified from your designer for Unreal. Certainly if you're using Blender, there's no way to bring in the pivot point. So we want our models to be done like this. The tank sits, so it centers in the middle there. The track, the center of the track's in the middle. The position that the turret here is going to connect to the tank is sitting on the origin. So that's important. But we've done all that for you. So basically you import those meshes and we're good to go. Right, so now we're going to make, in this same tank folder, we're going to make ourselves a new basic blueprint class. Okay, so create a basic asset blueprint class in the tank folder. Now, what's it going to be based on? Let's have a think about this. Is it an actor? Well, actor doesn't have enough coming with it because it doesn't allow for possession and receiving of input from a controller. So if we based it on an actor, we would have to do a load of stuff that is already done from us in the pawn, remembering that the pawn inherits from the actor and the character inherits from the pawn. It's like a family tree, remember. So as we go down from actor to pawn to character, we're getting more and more. But a character gives us too much. It's all about AI, which, yeah, we're going to use some AI, but we're going to use very simplified AI. But if you look at this description, we're not going to be using, it's not a vertically oriented player that can walk, jump, fly, and swim, yeah? It's just too much for a tank. So pawn is the appropriate class to base it on. So there you go. Now let's call it tank_BP. Oops, it doesn't matter if you missed, just rename. F2, by the way, will also rename for you. So there's the tank BP. Great. Now let's open it up and make sure it's docked. It is. Along the top here. Now later we can reparent this class. Now remember, of course, if you don't like the way that toolbar looks, remember you can right-click up or left-click here rather. You then get the handle. You can then drag that handle along the top if you need to. So. Like so. All right, and then you could hide that again. Now, remember later in the class settings, we're going to be able to change the parent class from a pawn, there it is, to something that we create ourselves called a tank.h, but not yet. Let's just build the tank for now. All right, so in the spirit of building the tank, let's go ahead and get on with it. Let's show you how to do it, and then you can come in and finish it off. So we're going to add a static mesh to the tank. I'm going to call it tank. There you go. I'm going to go and choose the tank body static mesh. Like so. So there it is. This is the beginnings of our tank. Now, in order to put the turret on the tank in the middle of this, we're going to use something called a socket for positioning. So I'm going to add a socket. Now, there are bugs with sockets, I warn you. So watch carefully. The way you add the socket is you add the socket to the tank body mesh. So we can find the mesh with the little icon here, or we could, so that by the icon here, I'm saying in the Details tab under Static Mesh, right there, you've got Browse To. That takes you to it in the content browser. Okay, so if we open up the mesh here, remember the purple thing is the collision mesh. It's generated as quite a sensible one, so we'll leave that for now. We create a socket. Now, be careful, don't rename it now. If you rename it now, the bug that's in this version of Unreal will stop it working. So just create it, call it socket. Then we're going to go and choose ourselves a preview mesh. This allows us to position the socket. So it's the turret that we are positioning. So choose the turret as a preview mesh there. Then if you drag the socket up, you see the turret comes with it. How cool is that? So this is your opportunity now to get the socket in the right place. So with the socket selected, you just get it to where it should be. I think it's about 150 in Z. There you go, looks pretty good. Now, if you want to be able to rename the socket, don't do it yet, you need to clear the preview, like so. So the drop down to clear. Now you can rename the socket to turret. I know, it's terrible, isn't it? Now make sure you save your blueprint. You can see it's not saved because there's a star there. And then we have done the first thing we need to do. Cool. Nice. Okay, let me show you that again for reinforcement, and then I think I'll get you to do the tracks. So now we're going to add another static mesh. Note curiously that if you try and add one, it's going to try and add one using the same Tank FBX static mesh, and that's because it's selected here in the content browser. If you deselect it and go back to the tank blueprint, you can now just add a empty static mesh, which probably makes more sense. Call it the turret. Now importantly, we child the turret by dragging under the tank like this. Now go and find the turret. And we're nearly there, but the turret is hidden, especially if we go to wireframe mode, you'll be able to see this. There, the turret is hidden inside the tank, okay? That's okay, that's what we expect at this point. What we want to do is to then say to the turret, your parent socket here is the turret socket that we put on the tank body. And boom, it snaps to it. Do you get the idea? Pretty cool, hey? All right, so that is the turret done. Now, what I want you to do is to go ahead and do the same magic for the barrel. So your challenge is as follows. Import the barrel, basically. Import the FBX file. It's already done for you. Create a socket on the turret. You can eyeball its position and also use the preview mesh. But remember the tricks. Remember that you don't rename the socket until you've added the preview mesh, positioned it, then you remove the preview mesh, then you can rename your socket. I'm sorry on Unreal's part that that's the case. Create the child and link it and set the socket and just check it all looks and rotates okay. So go ahead, pause the video and see if you can get the barrel set up now. Okay, welcome back. So let's do this barrel thing. Remember, with nothing selected over here, or if you like, with the barrel selected over here in the content browser, you can add yourself a static mesh. It will have a reference to the barrel then. I'm going to just call it barrel. Drag it under the turret. Now, that's on its way. Now, does the turret currently have a socket? It doesn't, does it? So we're going to add a socket to the turret. Going to use the barrel as the preview mesh. Then move the socket to where we want it to be. Now, you may want to be rotating this to check that it works. Yeah, that looks pretty good, about there. So my position for your reference is at X is 100, and let's call it 110, nice round numbers. And that the Z is at, say, 13, something like that. Just going to have a slightly closer look, make sure it looks reasonably good here. Designer will kill us if we put it in the wrong place. I think it's too low, personally, so I'm going to move that socket up to, say, 15, and 20, and 22. Okay, at about 22, it's looking about right. Again, check it rotates. That bit that sticks out the bottom is going to go inside the model, so we don't mind, and it can go low enough. Good, okay. So I'm going to leave that there like that. Now, that socket, we can remove the preview mesh, clear the preview mesh like so, and then we can now rename it to barrel. Horrible, I know, but it's what it is. Save it, make sure you save it. Back to the tank. Now, we go to the barrel and we say, what's your parent socket? Well, now you can say here, it's the barrel. Now, if your barrel ends up on the floor like this, that's because at some point Unreal has changed the default location of the barrel. The location of the turret should be 0, 0, 0, and the barrel should be 0, 0, 0 relative to the socket. So I've clicked reset, so we're at 0, 0, 0, and now we have things positioned as we wanted them. Let's check it all works. If, for example, I rotate here, the turret, the barrel's going with it, that's cool. And of course I can rotate the barrel as we did in the preview. Great, we have a tank pretty much together. I'm just going to put the tracks on now. That's a relatively simple job. Now the tracks, of course, are connected directly to the tank. So let's go to the track, back to the tank blueprint, add ourselves a track, call it left track. Then it's a job of positioning it, so I'm going to select left track, come into the viewport, get my W key shortcut. Now, we need a left track socket. Don't try and position it yet, remember. We want a left track socket on the tank itself, right? So we go to the tank body. We create a socket called left track or right track. I'm going left track. So left track. I'm going to select a preview mesh, which is the track, which will allow me to position this track. So here we go. Now, I made the mistake, didn't I? I renamed the socket before I moved it, and because of this nasty bug, it doesn't work. So if it happens to you, delete it, create a new socket, leave it named as it was, as I told you to, and then I ignored my own advice. Add the track in, position it, so we need to look a bit more carefully to do that. Still called socket. And I might position this more finely at a future point, but I think that roughly right is good enough here. But I'll get you some figures that you can use if you just want to use my figures. Again, you might be using your own tank model, so my figures are here for you if you care. There you go. So let's say about 30, minus 160 for round numbers, and about minus 6 in the Z. Okay, that's where I think the left socket should be. Now remember, you need to clear the preview mesh before then renaming it left track. How do I know it's left? Because the front of the tank, well, the back of the tank has these barrels on it here, these things. Okay, so that's the left track. Now for the right track, I want to do something very similar. I'm going to try just duplicating it. And that should work actually, because I don't need the preview mesh for this, because all I'm doing is looking at the Y coordinate and just setting that to the opposite. So the only things that change are the Y, minus some tiny floating point error there. Good, okay. Rename right track. Good, so we've got a left track and a right track socket on the tank. Let's save that. Back to the tank blueprint. Now the left tank track should be very simply attached to the left track socket. Now, the reason it's not showing up is because it can't find a left track socket here, because we haven't yet childed the track to the tank. Once it's a child of the tank, the left track socket will be available. And we want to duplicate this guy, call it right track, and just the only thing that changes is its socket should be the right track. Look at that. We have a tank. It's a miracle. Okay, I'm just going to compile this blueprint, save all, and as a final piece de resistance, if you like, I'm going to find the tank blueprint, drag it into the world, and look at that. A tank in the world. We can look at it, we can move it around, we can do what we like. We can't rotate its barrel from here because it's a single piece actor once it's in the world. I think I've got a track in the wrong place. No, I haven't. No, we're good. So there you go. We have a tank. Awesome.